Ezekiel 33:3.
The Roman festival of Lupercalia. If you haven't heard of this one before, it'll really make your eyes bug. So what is Lupercalia? Lupercalia was an ancient, possibly pre-Roman pastoral annual festival observed in the city of Rome from the 13th to the 15th of February. Okay, so right over Valentine's Day. To avert evil spirits and purify the city, releasing health and fertility. Okay, so the pagans were doing this ritual then for the sake of fertility. The root word of Lupercalia is lupus. Lupus, a Latin word that means wolf. It is widely acknowledged that Romans believed in an ancient deity that protected herds from wolves. So of course, if you have people in the field, shepherds obviously need to protect their flocks. They come up with this concept of this wolf spirit that's watching over the herd. That's the basic concept. And so, of course, this was a fertility ritual to then make sure that they would have more cattle. So in other words, the cattle would mate, and then also that their cattle would be safe. So health and fertility. So we can see here, this is a form of sympathetic magic. What they're trying to do is they're trying to influence the environment by doing things ritually. If we take a look at this time of year on the pagan wheel, we're dealing at the block that's called Imbolc. Imbolc is when the spring begins. So the reason why they were doing these fertility rituals is because they were trying to do sympathetic magic to make sure that the spring would bring new flock and also a good harvest, right? The start of growth. So Valentine's Day, Imbolc, February, all the same thing. We're going to actually show how they connect though. What are the origins of Lupercalia? It may be one of the longest celebrated religious festivals ever. So there have been many different holy days that have come and gone, many different festivals that have come and gone. From my research, this might actually be the oldest holiday in existence. Acilius Glabrio followed the common Roman fashion of making Romulus the founder of Roman institutions before Rome was established. And he says, Romulus, having his cattle stolen, sacrificed a goat and pursued the thieves. The Lupercalia commemorates that race. So the original Lupercalia had to do with something involving Romulus. So Romulus is where you get Rome from. So Romulus had cattle stolen. He sacrifices a goat, chases after the thieves. That is the origins of Lupercalia. So you'll notice that there's like a race element behind it too. So once we actually take a look at what the practice was, you'll find the quick moving, the race. Variants of this account tell Romulus and Remus, after they had conquered Aemilius or Numitor, had given them permission to found a new city, ran in joy to the place where they had been reared. All these accounts harmonize with those that ascribe the festival to Evander in the wolf, deity in Italy, that the Lupercalia was established before the city of Rome was founded. So there's some basic ideas in regards to when Rome was founded. The story of Romulus and Remus and the Sabines, if we go back far in time, it might actually be as far back as 700 BC. Rome might actually be as old as 700 BC. So this festival is actually older than that. So again, you can see this would be one of the oldest, longest celebrated holidays, especially when it can prove that it's still celebrated today by that name. How do you celebrate Lupercalia? Now this is where things get very interesting. The festival was held in honor of the fertility deity. Well, that's not surprising. Lupercus. Lupercus in Roman mythology is the god of shepherds. Lupercus is identical to the pagan god Faunus, the pagan god of sheep and shepherds. Faunus is identical to the Greek god Pan and the Celtic god Duzios. During this month, Februs was also celebrated. This was the god of purification. February is named after this god. So February gets its name from Februs. Februs was a god of purification. During this festival of Lupercalia, they were going through a purification. So they were doing sympathetic magic around the timings of the year. And at this particular season, when the sun would start to do its renewal, this was the purification. When you think about it too, when you think of purity, you think of water purifies, but also fire. Fire will burn and purify. So when you're thinking of the sun starting to heat up and go into the spring, we can see that symbol of purity. The priests of Lupercus were called Luperci. Lupercalia was led by two priests, At the festival, these men were dressed only in goat skin of the sacrificed animals to represent Lupercus. Okay, so we have men that are running around, priests, wearing goat skins that they have just recently killed. They would start the festival by sacrificing 2 goats for fertility and a dog for purification. So we have goat sacrifice and dog sacrifice. Professor Leonhard Smits of the University of Chicago writes that animals were chosen to be sacrificed for their strong sexual instinct, and thus were appropriate sacrifices to the god of fertility. Okay, so they picked the goat for a specific reason. In their minds, the goat was a strong symbol of sexuality. And of course, it's a fertility ritual. Remember, this is the new year, right? Spring was the new year. They're trying to get everything geared up for a good new year. They want new flock, they want a good harvest, so they're doing the sympathetic magic. The 2 priests would then be selected to approach the altar. Their heads were then marked, anointed, with the bloodied knife of the sacrificial animals before it was wiped off with wool and dipped in milk. Encyclopedia Britannica 2016. These men were expected to smile and laugh at the end of the process. After this, the people feasted on the sacrificial animals. Okay, so they would kill 2 goats. They would kill a dog. The dog was for purity. The goat was for fertility. They would take blood, put blood on their head, mark themselves, and then they would wipe it off with wool dipped in milk. Okay, so this is what the priests were doing. So this is a part of what was going on here. So it looked a little bit something like this. They take the knife covered in the animal's blood. We can see here there's a priest already wearing the goat gown, and then he would put it on the forehead. And if we take a look on the right-hand side, then we can see when the men come out, the men have the goats on them. They're covered in blood from head to toe. And then they actually have these straps in their hands. And we'll explain what those straps are in just a moment. I will point out that in the Bible, in the book of Leviticus, we talk about goat demons and people doing sacrifices to goat demons. If this isn't it, I don't know what to tell you. This is what the Greeks were doing. The Luperci also indulged in wine and covered themselves in blood of animals. They also covered themselves in the skin of the goats they sacrificed to imitate the god Lupercus. So then they themselves were trying to be Lupercus. They would then run around Palatine Hill. Women, some bare-breasted, would then approach hoping to be hit upon with the thongs. These pieces of skin are called thongs or februa. Now you can see where the word February comes in here. So in other words, they would sacrifice a goat, they would sacrifice dogs, they would wear it as a garment, but they would also take straps of the skin and make it into these little thongs that they would wear. Sometimes they'd be naked. It depends on what books you read. Some of the earlier times of Lupercalia, they were totally naked because Romulus was naked, because he was chasing after someone. In latter times, they made themselves thongs, and the thongs were made out of the goat skin. But in addition to wearing the thongs, they also had these little leather straps, which were made out of goat skin. And they would use these goat straps to actually whip the women with. This, they thought, would make them more pure, fertile, and cause the childbearing process to be much easier. So the women who are running around bare-breasted, while the men are covered in blood wearing goat skins, whipping them with goat, I guess a little goat whip. The purpose of them getting whipped in the first place was they thought they would become more fertile. So if a woman is trying to obviously become fertile, maybe she's barren, she's not able to have a child, well, she would obviously participate in a ritual like this to ensure that she would be fertile. So the men would run around and whip her with a strap, and the women would let them whip them with the strap in an effort to become pregnant. The people at the festival also ate sacred cakes called mola salsa, created by the Vestal virgins, with the wheat of the previous harvest. Vesta was the Roman goddess of domestic activity. So notice this piece here, it says the sacred cakes for the Vestal virgins. This goes right back to the book of Jeremiah. You should know what this is. In the book of Jeremiah, we read, they gather wood, the fathers light the fire, and the women knead the dough and make cakes to offer to the Queen of Heaven. They pour out drink offerings to other gods to arouse my anger. Was this happening in Rome? Well, the question was, what was the religion that Rome was practicing before Christianity? They obviously had a religion. Look at Romulus and Remus. They had a god. So then when we're looking at these different rituals that were happening in Rome before Christ, why would you expect it not to be connected to the Old Testament? It's the same Asiatic gods. So here in this image, we can see here's one of the Luperci, and he's running around to go chase after a woman who clearly wants to be whipped with a strap of goat skin. Here's another example. Again, in some of these images, you'll see that they're nude. In some of these images, you'll see that they have a little goat skin thong. It just depends on what time frame we're talking about. Here's another example. Here's a fresco. I'm not sure if this is a male or a female being lifted, but you can definitely see in his hand he's got the strap, and it's supposed to be the goat skin. It looks like this example, they were a little bit more modest because they seem to be more covered than some of the illustrations I've seen. Here's another example. Here's the women running wild through the woods. What would typically happen is the men would chase after them. And in some instances, it wouldn't just be whipping them with the goat skin. It would be whipping them. And if they were able to whip them, then at that point, they would just fornicate with them right there on the spot in the woods. Here's another example. These ladies in the background here don't look too excited about it, but typically the women were willing. Another reason which is offered for regarding Faunus as the god of Lupercalia is that the temple of Faunus on Tibur Island was dedicated February the 13th, 2 days before the Lupercalia. This naturally seems to indicate a connection between the god and the festival. And it may indeed easily be true that the priests chose to associate this half-forgotten god, to whom they had just erected a temple, with a festival that was as ancient as he was, and in which the goat had a prominent part. Such syncretism is common enough in Roman religion. So this is who they were celebrating. Faunus, or Pan. You should recognize him. You still see him today. This is actually the emblem of the Satanic Church. These days, though, they don't call him Faunus or Pan. Today, they call him the Baphomet, but it's the exact same character. You might also know him as the horny goat. As a matter of fact, remember, this was a fertility ritual. They were sacrificing goats. And in the ancient world, people saw goats as being associated to Pan, which means they were a fertility symbol. This is why we have the whole concept of a horny goat. You'll notice that the goat, he has an erect phallus. You'll see that he's playing on a lyre. And you'll also notice he's half man and half beast. Now, keep in mind, the Lupercalia, what were they doing? They were pretending to be Pan. So they were acting in the spirit of Pan. And if you remember in the Bible, when we talk about devils, for example, devils are not creatures that look like Pan. Devils are people. Judas Iscariot is an example of someone who was called a devil by Jesus Christ himself. So is it the spirit then that makes people act in a very profane manner? Remember, in the ancient world, we saw two cults. We saw a god and a goddess. We saw sun and we saw moon. Here's some more images from back in the past. So here are the Lupercalia running around again, and the women are basically waiting to get whipped by the men who are running through the city. And here's another example. And in this image, you can actually see a cherubim, or at least what you would think a cherubim looks like until you read the Bible. If you haven't seen the video on what are angels in the Bible, you definitely want to take a look at that, because cherubim do not look anything like this. Cherubim are not babies with wings. As a matter of fact, the description of cherubim in the Bible is so terrifying that if you saw one, you'd probably faint. You'll notice here, though, that there's also the goat. You can see people are riding the goat. If you look at these pictures, it's just complete hedonism. It's craziness. It's just nuts. It actually reminds me of Saturnalia. When I was looking at these pictures, I wasn't really sure if I was looking at Christmas or whether I was looking at Valentine's Day, because Saturnalia looks a lot like Lupercalia. And then here's another image. In the background, you can actually see someone that looks like a devil. So if you're trying to understand why maybe some of the apostles would have looked at this stuff that was coming out of Asia as devilish, well, they're dressed up like devils. Look in the background. And then you can see, again, the goat, and the people are just, I don't know, drunk and full of revelry. But again, you can see that they're sitting on goats and riding them. And I think that's really interesting because, of course, in Freemasonry, there's a ritual where they ride the goat, and that's the first ritual that you do. Well, it looks like it has some overlap with what was going on in Rome. And of course, we know that Freemasonry follows a different god than the God of the Bible. We've seen that before. And again, these symbols look very familiar to Masonry. There's a book called The Lupercalia. This was written in 1921. This is by Alberta Mildred Franklin. Of the ceremonial which was ascribed to the pre-Romans, we have a fairly coherent picture, though authorities vary slightly about the details. At the entrance to the cave, where in later times stood the statue of the she-wolf, a sacrifice was offered, In the earliest days, this was presumably a female goat. Later, probably when Luperca had been merged into Lupercus, a male goat seems to have been added. After the sacrifice, a ritualistic race was performed by the Luperci. Now, this looks a lot like what was kind of connecting to the origins, because Romulus originally was naked, covered in blood, or ate a goat or sacrificed a goat, and then started chasing after after the thieves. What might have actually happened, now that I think about it, what Romulus might have done was slaughter the goat, cover himself in blood, and chase them naked because he thought maybe that'd be intimidating. I mean, if you would see a naked man covered in blood chasing you after you stole something, you'd probably be intimidated. So here we can see the origins right here. After the sacrifice, a ritualistic race was performed by the Luperci, who in the earliest times were evidently wholly naked. So see, in the early times, they were naked because Romulus was naked. Most writers place the sacrificial feast after the return of the Luperci from their race. But Ovid, in his lengthy account, says that the Luperci had a slight repast, exvia dapes, before the race, and a feast after it. The natural interpretation is that immediately after the sacrifice, the Luperci tasted ceremonially of the entrails, as the priest of Lysias did as he had sacrificed. Such a rite explains Ovid's words, expia dapes. Then, at the close of the race, came the feast upon the flesh of the victim. So there were actually times in Lupercalia where the victim would be a goat, or the victim would be a dog, or the victim, in some cases, it's been questioned if it was a person. So they were actually sacrificing people in some cases on Valentine's Day, or Lupercalia. A god having far more intimate relation to the goat, and also much better known, was Faunus, an ancient deity of Latium. Latium is where you get Latin and Latin Rome. What is constantly mentioned with the Aborigines of Italy. The antiquity and character of Faunus comes out most clearly in his double. Fauna, the older deity, whom Faunus later displaced. She was known by many descriptive epithets, so that means titles. Fenta, Fatua, Tellus, that one should stand out. As a matter of fact, I've researched that name Tellus, and I do think the telephone company in Western Canada took the name from this deity. But anyways, Tellus, Ops, Maya, Bonadia, Dia. The kinship of this goddess to other earth mothers was recognized by Macrobius, who considered her identical with Proserpina, Hecate, Semele, and Cybele. Now that last name should ring a bell. When we were talking about Mother's Day, we always bring up that name Cybele. Who is Cybele? Cybele was the mother goddess that was worshipped. She's Gaia. She's the earth goddess. If you worship the earth, Cybele is one of her names. So you can see here, there is a connection then to what's going on Valentine's Day or Lupercalia with the worship of the earth. Actually, if you research Faunus or you research Cybele, both are going to point you back to the worship of the earth. As a matter of fact, you're going to see a mother-child relationship. And if you remember from the studies, how many times have I shown you in Asia, in Greece, and Rome, this mother-child relationship that existed long before the Virgin Mary and Christ? On this website here, ResearchGate, there's a paper that's written by a student that connects together Rudra Shiva and Sylvanus Faunus. In other words, you can connect Faunus all the way back to India. But is that surprising? Because every god that we've studied that was served in Rome or in Greece, we always notice that this Asian connection. As a matter of fact, the church today, if you look at the east side of the Catholic Church, the Eastern Christian churches, they're still riddled with stuff that came from the East. But is it surprising? Because we can see all throughout the Roman history, we looked at Easter, we looked at Christmas, now we're looking at Valentine's Day. What do we see? The same thing. We're seeing Hindu deities. And we know it didn't originate in India. It came from Babylon. That's Genesis 11. It came from the Aryans. The Aryans brought it into the Indus Valley from the northwest. So when did Valentine's come in? All we see right now is Lupercalia. How did it change? In 270 AD, it was the Catholic Church, actually. The Catholic bishop Valentine was clubbed, stoned, and beheaded by Emperor Claudius for refusing to acknowledge the monarch's outlawing marriage. The Catholics then made Valentine a symbol to oppose the Roman mid-February custom in honor of the god Lupercus. So here you can tell the church themselves acknowledge that the whole concept of Valentine's Day is to scrub out the old Lupercus, where Roman teenage girls' names were put into a box and selected by young Roman men, sex toy, until their next lottery. So what the Romans were doing, this is the origins of Valentine's Day. The box where you have little cards you put your names in, what the Romans were doing as part of this Luperci cult was they'd have a box, and it was basically a lottery. You'd have a bunch of women's names in there, and if you draw a woman's name out, she'd have to have sex with you, and she had no choice in it. She was your sex toy. That's what it was about. So at this point, this is when the Catholic Bishop Valentine put an end to it. As a matter of fact, the way he put an end to it was instead of having teenage girls' names placed into a box, he had the names of saints placed into a box. So that way you'd be taking out your favorite Catholic saint, for example. 496, November 21st, Pope Gelasius, an African by birth or descent, died. He changed the mid-February lottery rules for young Roman men so that they drew names of Catholic saints to emulate instead of young girls for play. So as a matter of fact, it looks like it didn't end in 270. It went on for another 200 years. The Lupercalia pagan rite had been revived to bring good luck in the city following a plague. And so basically what happened was you have one individual basically tries to get rid of it. He goes away and passes. And then the people, of course, they still have their old traditions stuck in their head. So as soon as they have another problem, what do? They try to revive Lupercalia because they think that's going to make the plague go away. The feast of Saint Valentine was established by Pope Gelasius in 496 to be celebrated on February the 14th in honor of Saint Valentine of Rome, who died on that day in 269. Now, the question a Christian could ask, if you want to be really critical about this, let's just say that we didn't know anything about Lupercalia and we just looked at this from the idea that this day has been dedicated towards a saint. Is there a problem with that? Absolutely. It's called veneration of the dead. You're not supposed to do it. There's a problem when you have feast days that are associated to dead people, or you have days of honor in general that are associated to dead people. That is exactly what honoring the dead is. That's veneration of the dead. That was something in the Old Testament that wasn't supposed to be done, but it's been normalized by the church because now there's a feast day for every dead person that has done something great in the church from the last 2,000 years. The day became associated with romantic love in the 14th and 15th centuries when notions of courtly love flourished, apparently by association with the lovebirds of early spring, although it was called purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary. It also dealt with the presentation of Jesus at the temple. So they rebranded it. Instead of being Lupercalia, now we're going to have it be Valentine's Day, named after Saint Valentine's, but we're also going to associate some theology to it, and it's made-up theology. The made-up theology is purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary. It doesn't exist. There's no Bible line about this. But what we've done is we've basically taken the purity, right? Remember, Lupercalia was about purification. We studied that. Imbolc, right? Imbolc, the month of February was about a god of purification. And now we're seeing that they didn't just remove Lupercalia completely. They've kept the theme because the theme of purification is still here, except instead of purification and then these other pagan symbols like the goat, we've now associated to Mary. But we've studied Mary in the past, and what do we find? Mary was called the Queen of Heaven multiple times on the Vatican's website. Well, who was I saying that Cybele was? Cybele is the Queen of Heaven. So while you rebranded it and you made it look Christian, if you actually understand the symbols that lie beneath it, you actually are worshiping the Queen of Heaven with the celebration of the purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary or Valentine's Day. Jerusalem's purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary on February the 14th became the presentation of Jesus at the temple on February 2nd, as it was introduced to Rome and other places in the 6th century after Gelasius the first time. Cupid, roses, and the heart. The Lupercalia also included the worship of Venus. Remember, Venus or Aphrodite is the love god. Who is Venus in the Old Testament? Book of Isaiah. We only see Venus in there once as the morning star. The morning star in the book of Isaiah is Lucifer. So when we talk about the devil or Lucifer, we talk about Venus, which means Lupercalia, which is associated to Cybele, overlaps with Venus, which we already know. We've studied Venus. We've studied Aphrodite. That was the Queen of Heaven. So far, we're noticing that in all of our studies, when we compare these gods and goddesses, they all overlap. And then secondly, we can see that all of our history seems to be riddled with the same gods and goddesses. So Lupercalia also included the worship of Venus. And we know in Rome, there was a temple built to Venus. And this was after Christ. She was the Roman goddess of beauty, love, fertility, and sexual immorality, such as prostitution. Now, when you think of Lupercalia, it looked like some kind of a prostitute event. You had people running around naked and whipping each other. Like, it just seemed extremely sexually immoral. And we know in the New Testament, it spoke about sexual immorality that was going on in churches such as Ephesus and Corinthia, which is Greece. Greek equivalent is Aphrodite. Venus's favorite flower is the rose. So when people talk about the devil, sometimes what they'll do in front of your face is they'll put the symbol of a rose, because the rose is actually a symbol for Venus, which is Lucifer. So when we talk about things like War of the Roses, it's a little bit more than what you think. She is thought to ride about in a chariot pulled by white pigeons. This one's new to me. Her son was Cupid, Eros in the Greek. Okay, so we've just figured this out here. Lupercalia involved the worship of Venus. Venus is Aphrodite. Aphrodite had a child who was Eros. Eros is Cupid. So in other words, we're worshiping the Queen of Heaven and the son of the Queen of Heaven, which in the Bible you could call Tammuz. Eros, Wikipedia. Eros is one of the erotes, along with other figures such as Himros and Pothos, who are sometimes considered patrons of homosexual love between males. If you study baby Cupid is not going to point you to just love between heterosexuals. It was love just of any kind. So he's a love god. So let's go a little bit deeper. Who is Cupid? We've already studied angels before, so we know this is not an angel. This can't be an angel. This is not what angels are described like in the Bible. We know that angels don't have wings. Cupid. So this is coming from the Wikipedia. In classical mythology, Cupid, meaning passionate desire, is the god of desire, erotic love, attraction, and affection. He is often portrayed as the son of the love goddess Venus and the god of war Mars. Okay, so Venus is Aphrodite. How does Mars fit in the Bible? Well, there was an angel called Samael. Now, Samael is not actually mentioned in the Bible, but you do read about him in apocryphal writings. The tree of knowledge of good and evil that was placed in the garden. If you read the book of Baruch, I believe it's Third Baruch. Third Baruch is, again, a deuterocanonical writing. The book of Third Baruch tells you that it was the angel Samael, which is the god Mars, who stuck the tree of knowledge of good and evil there. So if any of you think that God stuck the knowledge of tree and evil, the tree of good, the knowledge of good and evil in the garden himself, no, look in the book of Baruch. You'll find that it was an angel. And it's interesting because once I realized that Samael was the god Mars of the Romans, it's totally fitting. If you have an opposer and the opposer is Satan, which means adversary, and then you have an angel which is planting a tree which shouldn't be in the garden at all, and he's doing so to have man be deceived and fall, well, then he's making war against them. So Samael being the god of war, it's pretty fitting. But this is interesting. When we celebrate Valentine's Day, we're celebrating the offspring, really, of Venus and Mars, which would be Lucifer and Satan. That's ironic. He is also known in Latin as amor, meaning love. His Greek counterpart is Eros. So if his Greek counterpart is Eros, I challenge you, go read in the Wikipedia, read about Eros. You'll find that Eros, or baby Cupid of Valentine's Day, goes down into hell and mates with some kind of a deity in the abyss. They didn't tell us that around Valentine's Day in school. So this is actually where the origins of Cupid comes from. If you take a look on the left, this is Cupid. If you look on the right, this is a deity from Hinduism. Are you surprised though? How many deities have I shown you that were worshipped among Greece and among the Greeks and the Romans, anywhere in that area, and they always point you back to Buddhism or Hinduism and then eventually to Babylon? It's becoming a regular trend. This deity is called Kamadiva. Kamadiva. The name Kamadiva can be translated as God of Love. Diva means heavenly or divine and refers to a deity in Hinduism. Okay, this is getting really interesting. We're going to learn some inside information about who Cupid is. So Cupid, this god of love, he's a diva. What's a diva? We've studied this before. Go back to our video on demons. A diva, a member of a class of divine beings in the Vedic period. Vedic, we're talking the Vedas, that's India. That's the Aryans, which again points us back to Iran, which in Indian religion are benevolent and in Zoroastrianism are evil. Okay, so the Hindus, the Indians see the divas as being good And the Zoroastrians who came from Iran see these deities as evil. Ahuras and Devas. In the Gathas, the oldest hymns of Zoroastrianism, and thought to have been composed by Zoroaster, followers are exhorted to pay reverence only to the Ahuras and to rebuff the Devas, and others who act at lie's command. So stop right there. So Zoroaster is saying that the Devas are liars. That's really interesting because in the Bible, it says that the devil is a liar and that the children of the devil are liars as well. They're speaking in their native tongue when they're lying. So I wonder then, if we start to connect these deities that are worshipped in Greece and Rome, are we actually going to find some explanation towards what devils are? It says beneath this, that should not, however, be construed to reflect a view of primordial opposition, although the Devas would, in later Zoroastrian tradition, appear as malign creatures. In the Gathas, the Devas are collectively gods that are to be rejected. Now, here's why this should bother you. The Zoroastrians were the wise men in the Bible who visited Christ. We've studied this before when we looked at Christmas. The three wise men, or the three kings, were neither. They were the three magi. And there weren't three. We have no idea how many there were. We know they brought three gifts, but we don't know how many there were. We know that there was magi, though. And so when we look at the magi, where did the magi come from? Well, the magi came from Iran. Yeah, as a matter of fact, you can even get that from the Bible, from the book of Genesis. So the magi came from Iran. So the people who came and brought Christ gifts of frankincense and myrrh are telling you have nothing to do with the Devas. The Devas are liars. The Zoroastrians did not view Christ as God, but still rejected the Devas as evil. In the Farfane, the traditional name for the Zoroastrian credo, summarized in Yasna 12:1, the adherent declares, I profess myself a Mazda worshiper, a follower of the teachings of Zoroaster, rejecting the Devas. So who's Mazda? Mazda is short for Ahura Mazda. Ahura, you see, they had the Devas and they had the Ahuras. So Mazda was the chief Ahura. So think of this as angels and demons. If we say, for example, the Ahuras would be angels, then the Devas could be demons. It's the white and the black. As a matter of fact, Star Wars, the light forces and the dark forces and the way the force be with you, it actually came from this religion. So the Ahuras and the Devas would actually represent the empire versus the rebels. That's exactly what this is. When we look in the New World Encyclopedia at the word demon, it's going to remind us of something. The word demon derives from the Greek daimon, which itself comes from the verb diastai, meaning to divide and distribute. Isn't Satan someone who is an accuser, someone who's opposing God, and someone who divides the people? The word daemon here means divide. The Proto-European root debos for God, originally an adjective meaning celestial or bright and shining, has retained this meaning in many related Indo-European languages and Indo-European cultures, Deva, Hinduism, Latin deus, German tu, Welsh du, Lithuanian devas, but also provided other common word for demon and the Avestan deva. So in other words, there is a complete connection between the word Cupid, or not between the word Cupid, between the concept of Cupid and demon. Deva is Hindu. It came from the word Deva from Iran. Deva, Iran, is daemon in Greek. Sanskrit, Deva is a god, originally a bright or shining one. Now, didn't we say that Aphrodite, who is Venus, gave birth to Cupid? Well, Aphrodite, Venus, Lucifer gave birth to Cupid. Now watch this. A Deva, which is what Cupid is a bright or shining one. Here's the word Lucifer in the Bible, Hallel, 1966. Translation, a shining one. Are you starting to see the overlap here? Isaiah 14:12. O heaven, from heaven, O star of the morning, O Lucifer, star, son of the dawn. That's the one, that's the shining one. It overlaps with the word Cupid. So Cupid is based on Kamadiva. Cupid is based on a demon. The word diva is actually pointing you back to the word daemon. And this is not a Christian perspective. This is using the dictionary. So where did the heart symbol come from? Last time I looked at my heart, it looks nothing like what we see on the left. I don't even see any similarities in regards to how you could make that kind of an image. You don't see the outline of the aorta or any of the major arteries. This is actually where it came from. When you're looking at that cartoon heart symbol, the reason why it makes no sense to you is because it's actually communicating something that has to do with the yin and the yang, or the sun and the moon. Remember, the pagans worshiped the sky and the ground, and they personified them like they were people. So the heart is actually the yin and yang, and I'll show you how they did it. When you look at the sun, the pagans would associate the sun to a circle or an upward triangle. Upward triangle is an association to fire. The moon was also associated to the earth, and the earth was looked at like a big square. And so the moon or the earth were associated to the symbol of the square. So we have the circle for the sun and the square for the moon. And when we wanted to show with a triangle, it was a downward triangle. So if we take a circle and a square and put them together, or we take an upward triangle and a downward triangle and put them together, what we're seeing actually is a heart. We're seeing the yin yang. I'll show you how it works. So first off, let's just point out what this symbol goes back to. Notice that when we have the two triangles, one for the sun, one for the moon, and we overlap them, what do we get? Well, the six-pointed star. And the six-pointed star, as you can see on this church, points us back to this goat-looking character. So that means that this goat Pan, this goat that we saw worshipped at Lupercalia, he has an association to the six-pointed star. Now remember, this was a fertility ritual, and fertility, sex. Well, they had a god that was a love god. Remember, Lucifer is a love god. The devil deceives people by manipulating their heart. If the truth is the truth, there's no point trying to manipulate you using a lie. Instead, the lie is not a lie having to do with logic. The lie is a lie to the emotions. Lucifer speaks to the emotions, and if it feels good, you go and you do it. And so here you see the goat, but watch this. That six-pointed star, again, that six-pointed star has nothing to do with Israel. That six-pointed star is the goat and the torch of illumination on the center of the goat's head. As a matter of fact, this was an association to the old Roman god Saturn. And as we see on this talisman of Saturn, we can see the goat on the back of it, or the bull. Now in the Bible, this was called Moloch. Moloch was someone that they would do child sacrifice to. Now this is how the heart comes into play. If you take a square and you flip it diagonally, and then you take a circle and cut it into two halves, and then you attach that to the square, there's your heart. So the heart is really the combination of the circle and square put together. In other words, the male and the female, the sun and the moon, the goat god and the goddess, or the queen of heaven and the destroyer. The heart symbol is actually a square and two half circles placed together. It has nothing to do with your heart. The reason why is because this symbol is actually associated to their goat god, their horned deity. For example, the Wiccans, they have a horned deity, or Cernunnos of the Celts. They associate this as being God. And if this symbol to them means God, then it's a symbol of life and it's a symbol of love. And that's why when we studied the Lieben rune, the love rune, which is the peace sign flipped the other way, it was associated to a symbol of the stag god. So in other words, the heart is a symbol of the stag god, or the upside down peace symbol is a symbol of the stag god. And the reason why is because in paganism, the stag god wasn't seen as something scary. It was a symbol of love and life and peace. As a matter of fact, in American Sign Language, I love you is the sign of the horns. And people have gotten away with doing the symbol by just saying that they're saying I love you in sign language. But you have to know who came up with the symbol. Helen Keller was the person who came up with the American Sign Language. Helen Keller was a member of the Swedish Borgian Church. If you look at the bottom, it says the teachings of the Swedish scientist and theologian Emanuel Swedenborg. So if you know the story of Helen Keller, you know she was dumb, deaf, and blind. So you can imagine it'd be very difficult to teach someone who is not able to necessarily take an input the way that everyone else can. How did the Swedish Borgian Church take Helen Keller so far? They taught her meditation. Someone who is dumb, deaf, and blind probably won't have much of a problem learning how to meditate, considering they're living inside of themselves most of their lives. Although Swedenborg spoke in his works about a new church that would be based on theology, he never tried to establish such an organization. In 1768, a heresy trial began in Sweden against Swedenborg's writings and two men who promoted them. The trial questioned whether Swedenborg's theological writings were consistent with the Christian doctrine. The Swedenborg Christians were saying that they were Christians. And so here you can see that the church itself was put on trial, questioning, were you actually teaching the Bible at all? It goes on and says, a royal ordinance in 1770 declared that his writings were clearly mistaken and should not be taught, but his theology was never examined. Occultism became increasingly popular in the 19th century, particularly in France and England, and some followers blended Swedenborg's writings with theosophy, alchemy, and divination. Swedenborg's mystical side fascinated them. They concentrated on heaven and hell, which described Swedenborg's visits to heaven and hell to experience and report on the conditions there. In structure, it was related to Dante's Divine Comedy. So this stands out to me because this symbol that Helen Keller came out with, she did not come out with this symbol or even the ability to communicate with the outside world until she was approached by the Swedenborgian Christians. The Swedenborgian Christians have no connection to the Bible. They're into mysticism. What mysticism are they into? This mysticism. So when Helen Keller was doing the symbol of I love you, she was doing the symbol of the horned god because that's what she would have seen in her head when she was meditating, and she associated this symbol as a symbol of love because there is nothing evil about the horned god to someone who worships it. But of course, this shouldn't be a new symbol for the church, considering this came from Asia. The horned god is an Asian concept. It comes from Babylon and it went into the East. And that's why when you look at all these different religious pictures and even things that have nothing to do with the Catholic Church, you will see these symbols that are shown up in music videos, television, rock and roll. This is not rocking it out. This is the sign of the horns, which goes all the way back to Cybele and Faunus and Pan. And Pan was the god of the pagans. Swedenborgian theology and symbolism came from Asia. Now we're going to go into a strange segue. So what does Sabrina have to do with our topic, aside from just looking kind of dark?
The final night of the Lupercalia. Hoods hunt wolves, witches hunt warlocks. The outcome of the hunt shall determine the year ahead. Will it be bountiful or barren? Fruitful or fallow? Tonight we hunt and are hunted, releasing our blessed magics into the night. Warlocks, are you ready? And witches, are you ready?
So here what we see is we see the Luperci, or the male, and you saw them, they're called warlocks. So the male witches dress up like wolves, and the females, they're supposed to be chased by the wolves. Unfortunately, in this episode of Sabrina, they had it totally backwards. The women don't chase the men chase the women. But in this very hyper-feminist climate that we're living in, they probably changed it for that very reason. However, we still saw the ritual. Why exactly are we teaching teenage children a fertility ritual from a couple thousand years ago? Are we going to actually teach our kids to whip women with leather straps and then fornicate with them in the woods? Why are we making this kind of material? If you don't think you're being indoctrinated, then tell me what this is. You probably never heard of Lupercalia till today, but you would have learned about it through television. So if we take a look here, the Lupercalia mating ritual is being taught to teenagers. On one hand, we're concerned about teenage pregnancy and abortion. On the other hand, we're making television shows where men and women dress up like animals and then fornicate with each other in the woods. And people have a problem with Christianity, question mark.
Well, we're entering phase 2 of Radio Werewolf's operation for world dominion. And what we're waging is a cultural war right now on every front, in music, in literature, utilizing the media against itself. What we're trying to do is bring back a resurgence of the Western European tradition that has been all but lost in the world. And we're using music because that's the instrument that young people respond to right now. We're doing propaganda directly to awaken the wolf in man, because the wolf is a symbol of Western European power and fury, and that's why we use the werewolf imagery.
What do you believe that would be like if you were in control as far as your attitudes towards your own people?
Well, we are in control because basically we are not a political organization, we are an occult organization. We're working behind the scenes to manipulate the way that people think. The war that we are waging is a guerrilla war on the human mind.
CBC.ca, Satanic Temple settles lawsuit over goat-headed statue in the chilling adventures of Sabrina. Temple says haters accuse it of being a powerful satanic organization bullying a teenaged witch. So here we can see they have the Baphomet right in Sabrina. But what did we see before that? They were celebrating Lupercalia. Well, Lupercalia, or Lupercus, who is he? Pan. Who's Pan? The Baphomet. Are you surprised that the Baphomet is in Sabrina, considering we just saw Lupercalia, where the men pretended that they were the Baphomet running around as the Luperci? Are you starting to see how this indoctrination works? Here's George Washington, who we know was a Freemason. And then if we take a look, these are the Knights Templar. That's Freemasonry in France. But you'll notice the deity that they were accused of worshiping was what? Well, the Luperci, the same symbol that was symbolized through Lupercalia, the goat, the Baphomet. Now, the goat was sacrificed during this ritual, but it was supposed to be in honor of Faunus. But then again, we go to the Super Bowl, we see the same thing. We see Madonna referencing the Baphomet, and it's not just Madonna with like a horn-like crown on her head. She's clearly dressed like a Roman. That's Roman attire. Yes, she has a crown on her head that looks like a pair of horns, but she also has one hand up and one hand down during the ceremony, making it evidently clear to anyone that this is clearly the Baphomet. But like, are you surprised? How many television shows? How many songs? How many movies? Like, aren't you getting tired of looking at goats all the time? You've got celebrities calling themselves the greatest of all time, like it's some kind of an inside joke, and it is an inside joke. When no one reads the Bible anymore and they have no idea that people are worshiping goat demons, they don't understand that this is a real thing. It's a spirit. Here we see Sabrina, who's clearly a witch. That's what the show's about. But they always put these little subliminals in your face, like the apple. And I mean, we saw the same thing with Walt Disney, and I don't even think it's subliminal. Last week, when we saw the television show called Wicked, we want to be evil, we want to be wicked, and the bunch of witches had an apple in front of them. At this point, I'm just shaking my head and thinking, like, parents, like, how desensitized are you to the devil? Introducing Sabrina's real life behind the scenes pagan. So do you think it's a coincidence that you're seeing all this pagan symbolism in these TV shows? Well, here's a confession. 2018. Production designer Lisa Soper explains how her occult faith helped create the world of chilling adventures of Sabrina. Do I really need her to confess that? I saw Lupercalia, I saw the Baphomet. It doesn't get more satanic than that in regards to symbolism. Do I actually have to be so slow that I need the director, the production designer to come out and confess? You should be waking up to this stuff. Soper, like Sabrina, is a practitioner of the occult. No duh. Sabrina's witchcraft is a fictional blend of magic and mysticism, drawing from a variety of subcultures. Paganism, which Soper practices, is one of them. Her beliefs made designing this show. Contemporary paganism, sometimes referred to as modern or neo-paganism, is an umbrella term for the belief and the practice that encompasses modern witchcraft, including Wicca. The Church of the Night in Sabrina is a fictional construct, we hope, but witches aren't. According to the Pew Research Center, about 734,000 Americans identify as a Wiccan or pagan. Let me repeat that. According to the Pew Research Center, this is exactly where the news quotes statistics from. About 734,000 Americans identify as Wiccan or pagan, and you still don't notice their symbols on your television. Wow. The Economist estimates that over 100,000 Britons likely practice neo-paganism in Iceland. Nordic paganism is the nation's fastest growing religion. Soper helped to create the sets of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, building structures that echo the magical elements of the story, particularly the Spellman house, which is loaded with symbolic details and charm touches. I tell you, when you watch your television and you watch these sitcoms, look at the background. If there's little Buddha statues, little goat statues, little symbolic anything about religion, understand that when the credits come up for your favorite show, there's like 20 people that were involved on putting so much as a coffee cup on the table in the show Friends. So anything that's laying around that is a cult, anything that's laying around that's symbolic to religion, stop lying to yourself and pretending like they're not putting it there. This director, this producer outright says she puts those symbolic details in the show. Viking runes for resurrection and death are carved into the entryway. The foyer is symmetrical, reflecting Sabrina's emphasis on balance, the opposing poles of gender, morality, and mortality. So look at this. They're going to use this show to teach you morality. It says so. I wonder whose morals they're going to teach you. And notice this, the opposing poles of gender. It's called the yin and yang. The opposing poles of gender, sun and moon.
Lupercalia gets the blood pumping in ways our other more staid traditions simply do not.
Indeed it does. Why, you yourself look a good 70 years younger, Sister Zelda. Glowing, radiant, fecund.
We should get down to business, don't you think, Your Excellency?
Welcome, one and all, to Lupercalia, the Festival of the Wolves. Brother Ambrose.
All right, fellas, take your places for the matching.
Don't even think about it. Half-breed. 2 years ago, Prudence was paired with Nick for Lupercalia. Last year, Agatha was. This year, it's my turn.
All right, ladies, you know how this goes. When the music stops, take a seat on the warlock closest to you.
Oh, sorry, Sabrina.
Wait.
So what you're watching here is actually the maypole ritual. So the funny thing is they really went all out because February is when Lupercalia celebrated. But this ritual that we're doing in this video here, that's actually celebrated in May. So they wanted to go all out on this episode and indoctrinate your children with as much different ritual as possible because it's like they're combining Christmas with Easter. They just put the two holidays together even though they're separated by months. If you take a look here, they're twisting around this pole. You should recognize this. As a matter of fact, when they were playing the music, you'll notice the person who was playing the music, he was playing a violin. What's a violin? Well, that's a lute. Didn't we learn that a lute is the guitar or the violin or the instrument that the devil plays? We learned that last week. But it wasn't just playing a lute. He wasn't just playing the violin. He was blindfolded playing the violin while they did that. Why was he blindfolded? Because if you Google the name Samael, it means the blindness of God, and you'll see an angel that is blindfolded. So to see a man playing a lute while they do a maypole festival, blindfolded, yes, he's actually articulating that he is the devil. But watch, it gets even more in your face. This is the maypole festival, and you'll see children in Europe running around this pole. It actually represents the stripper pole. This is where you get the concept of a woman on a pole from. Notice that it's all girls running around this pole. This is where this whole phallic pole worship came from. Remember, this was a fertility ritual. Lupercalia was all about fertility. When you think of women on a pole and fertility, you think of a strip club, or you think of Lupercalia and the Maypole Festival. You're teaching your children how to be sacred prostitutes. In the Old Testament, this was called sacred prostitution. It went back to a cult called the cult of Asherah. We've called her the Queen of Heaven. Maypole. A maypole is a tall wooden pole erected as part of various European folk festivals around which a maypole dance takes place. What kind of a dance? A maypole dance, a stripper dance. Is this explained anywhere in the Bible? Of course it is. 2 Kings 23, 6 and 7. He brought the Asherah Pole from the houses of the Lord to Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem, and there he burned it, ground it into powder, and threw its dust on the graves of the common people. He tore down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes that were in the house of the Lord, where the women had woven tapestries for Asherah. Who's Asherah? The Queen of Heaven. And the Queen of Heaven has a pole? Yeah. And in the Old Testament, we saw both male and female temple prostitutes. This is the pole where the maypole comes from. This is the Asherah pole. You'll notice the Asherah pole looks a lot like the Statue of Liberty. You'd almost think like the founding fathers had a different religion than Christianity, because this statue obviously represents nothing in the Bible, but it does represent something that might have come from Egypt or something that came from Babylon, the Queen of Heaven. 2 Kings 23, 6 and 7. The king also desecrated the high places of Jerusalem to the south of Mount of Corruption, which King Solomon of Israel had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians, for Shamash, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Milcom, if you know that name Milcom, Milcom is Moloch. So in other words, that goat, that god that they would sacrifice their children to, right there. That's that god Pan that we keep seeing. It says he smashed the sacred pillars to pieces, cut down the Asherah poles, and covered the sites with human bones. So Asherah poles, good thing or a bad thing? Oh, they're a bad thing. What were they associated to? When Israel started to go towards a goddess and the people were involved in perverse sexual behavior. So are our children being conditioned to embrace paganism? Well, the strip club seeming like a pretty normal thing in this century. Wasn't 50, 60 years ago, but I also wasn't seeing the goat in every single commercial or television show or song either. So obviously it's working.
Horror upon horror. Our beloved Antipope, slain. Our academy attacked by the false gods' hunters. And most recently, the Witches' Council has turned its back on us. But praise Satan, there is a man who is willing to shield you, to guide you back to the old ways you so arrogantly forsaken. The Church of Night is gone. We are now the Church of Judas. And you must look to the 5 tenets of Judas for salvation and exaltation. The Academy will adopt these beliefs immediately. Learn them, do not deviate from them, and we will once again know satanic greatness.
And there's no indoctrination on television. It's that blatant. I think when this all ends and people find out that there was a devil deceiving everyone, they're going to feel stupid when they see television shows like this. It was so blatant. So in this example here, they said that they are going to adopt the 5 tenets of the, what was it, Church of Judas? Who's Judas in the Bible?
Horror.
The 5 tenets of Judas, John 6:70. Jesus answered him, have I not chosen you 12? Yet one of you is a devil. He was speaking about Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. For although Judas was one of the 12, he was later to betray Jesus. So this show is getting hardcore in regards to Satanism because, I mean, children who haven't read the New Testament, they don't know who Judas is. So then what? Now we have a Church of Judas, so we're going to celebrate the crucifixion of Christ? What a messed up show. And if we actually go back a little bit here, when they unveiled the statue, I noticed something while this is playing. While he's talking, they show the statue, and then they flip the camera angle. Let's see if I can find this here. Gotcha. Right here. Here's the bull. See, everything they put in the background, they put for a reason. If you're looking for the Baphomet in this scene, it was right behind this lady in red. Again, indoctrination. So, look, is there anything that is pointing out that she might be a devil? Remember, devils look like us. Angels look like us. John 6:70, Jesus answered them, have I not chosen you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil? The 12 apostles, right? That means that one of the 12 apostles, Judas, was a devil. And then we see Sabrina, who is preaching, or at least the show is preaching this garbage. And then look what's behind her head. That's clearly the Baphomet. That's Pan. That's Faunus. That's why we're celebrating Lupercalia. If you take a look, here's a magazine post, Spellbound. So this is not even necessarily having to do with her show, but since she's on the show, they kind of keep that magic theme. If you look at the graphic design, though, they give you a symbol here right out of the Bible. You'll notice here's the pentagram, and the pentagram, sure, that's Venus, that's Lucifer, whatever. But I was more interested in the symbol beside the pentagram. You notice beside the pentagram, there's an upside down triangle with a line going through it. That's the alchemical symbol for Earth. Why does that stand out to me? Revelation 13. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. This beast had 2 horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. And the beast exercised all authority of the first beast and caused the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose mortal wound had been healed. So what's the job of the beast of the earth in Revelation 13? To get you to worship something. The beast in Revelation 13, the beast of the earth, is trying to get you to worship something. So if I notice that this young lady is putting a symbol of the earth on here, and they're talking about Satan, and they're talking about Judas and the 5 tenets, is that not worship? But you're thinking, oh, it's just a joke, right? It's just, they're just trying to look kind of edgy so it works for the show. Well, whether they're trying to look edgy to make it work for the show or not, everything that they're teaching is textbook in regards to paganism. The beast of the earth caused people to worship the first beast. Why not pick up some of the Sabrina clothing line? You can pick up this cool looking baseball jersey. It has Sabrina on it and then 666. And again, it's so blatant that you're just like, oh no, there's no devil. They wouldn't be this blatant. I'm like, okay, so let me explain this here. We have children running around with horns on their head, dressed up like wolves, pretending to have sex with each other, teaching this to teenagers, and you still haven't clued in that this might be something the devil would teach your kids. Okay. How about this? Here's another magazine that she's on the front cover of. Oh, look, the 666 on both of her eyes. 666, the number of the beast. But I guess this girl that's selling this t-shirt knows this, because in the center, she has the 666 right on her t-shirt, just like the Pope with the 666. And that's Pope John Paul. Are they practicing magic? Is that what this symbol is? Because it looks like the beast in the Bible is a practitioner of magic. Here's another symbol. Mudra magazine. This one's obvious. Didn't I say that Lupercalia went back to the Queen of Heaven? And didn't the Queen of Heaven come from Egypt? I wonder why she looks like she's depicting herself as Horus or Harpocrates out of Egypt. That's a very odd pose to do, unless, of course, you're trying to communicate that you're Harpocrates. Harpocrates was the god of silence, secrets, and confidentiality in the Hellenistic religion. What's Hellenistic? That means Greek. Didn't the Romans and Greeks celebrate Lupercalia? They sure did. So if the Greeks were the Hellenists, and she's showing Lupercalia on a show, and she's doing a symbol that's found in the religion of Harpocrates, which connects to the Hellenist religion, how much more in your face could it be? You're just not wanting to see what's directly in front of you. But don't worry. Sabrina identifies as a Christian, so we have nothing to worry about here. When the answers are hidden, this plain to see, no one can pretend that they had no idea when it's all over. If I was to show you in the afterlife, hey, did you know there was a devil and the devil was deceiving the whole world and trying to make people just their worst? Well, I mean, maybe now you might be kind of hesitant, but after the fact, if you look at all this video footage that even you sat down with me and looked at, you're going to feel really silly. As a matter of fact, look at this. I'm the Dark Lord's sword. And she is doing what? She's depicting herself as if she's Christ, but clearly as if she's some kind of an antichrist. But I mean, is that surprising? What has the show been promoting? But again, there's no devil, there's no Satan. They're just being trendy. Now I'm going to move over to a video that I just made today. I call this a tunnel video. If you haven't seen this, it's really going to open your eyes in regards to what is the religion of the world leaders.
The Goddard Tunnel is a railway tunnel, an underground through the mountains and underground deep railway tunnel in Switzerland. It's the deepest and the longest such railway tunnel in the world. It's 35.6 miles long. I don't know that I would go on a train underground for 35 miles, but anyway, there it is. It's the Goddard Tunnel. All right, it's this great achievement of man, this technological engineering achievement, so they're going to celebrate it. I kid you not, there are videos of this. So what I'm going to say, if your audience doesn't know this, again, it's going to be so sensational. And again, I tell you, I don't over-sensationalize anything. I just bring stuff that people have never heard before, but it's right there. They can go back and research it, and it's in mainstream media because it was reported gleefully. Here's what happened. The opening of the Goddard Tunnel, the ceremony, they set up this big stage. I think it was near the entrance of it on one side of it. They invited powerful industry and government leaders from around the European Union especially. I think they invited other dignitaries of the world, but those were the main ones they were focusing on. They set up bleachers and they put up a big stage to have this opening ceremony. And there were, you know, thousands of people there. Mm-hmm. And they had a dignitary area with the big, you know, red sashes and ribbons and all that. So for the dignitaries, the world leaders to sit. So out comes this parade. It looks like a Macy's Day parade or something. I mean, you know, and out come all of these figures. They've got people suspended from cables like they're flying through the air. And you start looking at all of this. And again, all this is on video. So you can see it. You can see it on YouTube. A lot of the news articles that wrote about it back then, 2016, 2017, they embedded some of the videos in their articles. And most of them didn't see or say what we're getting ready to see or say. They were celebrating it. But you have this parade, and before long you're looking and you're saying, this is weird. This is almost like going to a halftime show at Super Bowl and say, there's some occultic stuff in here. Well, this was in your face because you began to realize that these people were dressed in such a way that they were supposed to be representing, it looked like otherworldly beings, demons, angels, whatever, you know, from the dimension. Yeah, oh yeah, that's how they were dressed. And again, some were suspended and kind of flying, and others were walking. It was all choreographed. They were doing a dance, and then the drums were pounding and the music playing. And then the next thing that is presented is it's a live person, but dressed up as the Goat Man.
Oh my goodness!
Who comes out? He's sitting upon a throne, and then they start simulating homosexual sex acts in front of him as worship. This is at the opening of a railway tunnel.
Celui-ci, c'est italien. Celui-ci, c'est italien. Merci, merci, merci. 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 Merci
viaggio in carrozza sulla strada del Passo era un'avventura.
This will be a very short episode just to report on something that happened recently in Europe, something truly diabolical. The world's longest rail tunnel opened in Switzerland. It runs under the Alps. The tunnel is 67 kilometers long, and it shaves about 45 minutes off the total time of getting from one end of the tunnel to the other, otherwise the driving around the normal route. It cost 11 billion euro, which is an enormous amount of money, perhaps 13–14 billion dollars. Took 11 years to build, as I understand it, or 17 years after the first blast in the main shaft it took to build this tunnel. It's the world's longest railway tunnel. And the tunnel opened on June 1st, Wednesday, with an opening ceremony on a grand scale.
Des Rates danke ich herzlich allen, die dazu beigetragen haben. Le Rhône et le Tessin prennent leurs sources de les Alpes. Im Namen des Bundesrates heißt
Here's the issue. The ceremony was truly diabolical, literally so. The ceremony can be viewed, careful, there is a lot of impurity, immodesty, gross immodesty in it, because among other things, it features men and women on a float-like structure in their underwear simulating perversions, performing perversions with each other, including women and women performing perversions to each other. This is not to celebrate the opening of this.
So, I haven't looked into this kind of stuff in a while, but there's been some weird happenings around the world lately. For example, the potential that the human species may have been around a lot longer than we initially thought, based on these monolithic structures that we previously suspected to be about 4,000 years old, are now suspected to be a lot older. Ancient civilizations talking about groups of men that came to their countries and brought civilization, astronomy, and agriculture, and lately all these world mysteries have been occupying a lot of my time. So there I was over at a friend's house, just hanging out, having myself a good day, when my friend looks over at me and says, "I gotta show you this video, dude, you're not gonna believe this." Now maybe you've seen this video before, and if you have, you probably know what this video is gonna be about. Normally I don't touch these kinds of strange videos, but I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this, and those that do take the situation a bit too far. So I wanted to watch through this with you guys today and see what the hell might be going on with this ceremony. Now first things first, let's talk about what this actually is. In 2016 Switzerland, the world's largest and deepest tunnel was built, spanning 35.4 miles and 1.4 miles deep. There was a lot of hype around this tunnel, being as it passes through the Swiss Alps and makes the journey from Switzerland, Germany, Italy, and France a lot quicker. The strange part about this tunnel was the opening ceremony, which didn't take too long as I was watching it to realize that this was a bit weird. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire ceremonies, that would take over an hour, but I have a few bullet points and spots in the videos that I'd like to discuss, and if you're curious, I'll leave the links to the full thing in the description and you can make your own judgments on this. So first things first, this ceremony was put on in Switzerland for the opening of the tunnel. World leaders from all over Europe, mostly leaders from Germany, France, and Italy were invited, which makes sense being as that's who this tunnel would affect most, but it also seemed to spook a lot of people and I can kinda understand why once it gets going. One thing to note, before the ceremony began, the tunnel was blessed by a priest, and then right after that, this satanic display arose. So the first thing we have here is a large group of people walking into the center of the tunnel almost like they're dazed or under the control of the music. The way they walk has been likened to a zombified state by pretty much anyone who did touch on this video. Now, the first part of this isn't so bad. Just a choreographed dance put on by people dressed up as construction workers. Sure, the music's a bit dark, but overall nothing too weird yet. At about 5 minutes in, the construction workers become a bit manic, like they don't know what they're doing. And then right after that, this last train car brings in a group of people who are dressed in more revealing clothing, and accompanying them is what most have identified as a fallen angel. Which is apparently an angel that disobeyed God and became corrupt. I know this seems like a bit of a stretch, but once the ceremony really gets going, there's absolutely no confusion here on this. There's even a scene in here that may even be an imagining of the fallen angel corrupting people. After this, another card is rolled in with what people refer to as demonic creatures, and then with them is a goat man, who typically represents Satan in ancient scribbles. As I was watching through this with my friend, the thoughts in my head were, all of this for a tunnel? But don't worry, it gets a lot stranger than this. At around 14 minutes, we see this goat is being worshipped, and people are bringing him offerings of trees, which I guess are upside down trees? Now, I never knew this, but apparently this symbolizes an upside down cross, or the tree of death, which really does fit the theme here. When I was watching this part and thinking about it artistically, I imagined that maybe this was supposed to be some depiction of hell, or a dark world, or something like that. Right after that, though, this man gets on a stage and sings in gibberish, and he even speaks in gibberish. It's kind of like he's calling for Satan, and Satan does respond. Right after that, the man who is singing sits down and watches everyone around him start celebrating. Possibly celebrating the arrival of Satan? There are a few who speculate that the red lights in here are supposed to represent a blood sacrifice, but that's not really clear to me. At least until they take the severed head of a woman and lift it above the dancers. The silk that falls from her head seems to represent that she was decapitated, as though it's blood. The severed head is then put on a body of a woman, and the first train makes its way through the tunnel. Now, if that was it, fine. It's freaking strange, but the next half of this display actually takes place outside. This is the part that was kind of odd to me. I mean, fine, you made art, cool, but to sit everyone down inside the tunnel, and then put on half of the performance, and then to have everyone move outside to complete it? I mean, that's just a lot of effort over a tunnel opening ceremony, right? I mean, most of these things are as simple as cutting a ribbon, crowd cheers, and now the tunnel's open and everyone can go on about their day. But whatever, let's move on to the second part. Okay, so here we are in part 2. Everyone's gone outside, and we start off again with a large group of construction workers walking in a daze, as though again they're being controlled by the music. They make their way up to this platform where a giant screen sits, and once they get up there, the workers start climbing up the wall and removing rock to form this tunnel. Now, there were a few videos I saw where they were speculating that this was the rock of Christ, but I didn't really catch the evidence for that. I'm just not sure the symbolism was there to make a claim like that. honestly, it's part 2 that gets really weird. Instead of opening a tunnel, they seem to open up a portal, and they perform this ritualistic dance in order to open it up. One thing a few people noted was as the tunnel opened up, the workers started removing their clothes, which could symbolize a corruption of their minds. Like right and wrong doesn't exist the more they open this portal, which does seem to happen. As the tunnel opens, eventually people dress similarly to how they did when they were in the hellish realm from part 1. Eventually the music takes over again, and the people seem hypnotized and controlled, but after this is where things get really interesting. It looks like some sort of voluntary human sacrifice happens. These 3 men climb up into the tunnel and hang themselves until they're dead, and then there's this animation on the screen of the 3 workers being hurled down the tunnel as these giant demonic hands grab at them. Did I mention too that the music is really setting the tone for all this as well? It just kind of blew me away how organized all this was. It's at this point that the 3 men who sacrifice themselves turn into 3 spirits and float above the scene with an all-seeing eye, and a group of followers underneath who grab their long horns and start playing. And right after this, Satan returns. And at this point, it kind of makes sense why the first half of this performance was inside. It could have been a metaphor for Satan leaving his world and entering ours, which... what the hell? This whole show is just straight up weird. This isn't some sideshow, this was the opening ceremony for a train tunnel. And right after Satan comes, you have these demonic creatures again, and those 3 men who turned into 3 ghosts now seem to have reincarnated into 3 scarabs. Maybe they were all never the same thing, but the number 3 shows up a lot in this video. The goat man, who we suspect is Satan, then proceeds to have sex with a fallen angel or a woman of some sort, and then for a while it's nothing but chaos. Now, this we saw before with the man in the tunnel singing for Satan. Now we have a woman singing for Satan, and his new followers are bringing upside down trees as offerings again. I honestly don't know what to make of this next part. Perhaps it symbolizes materialism or the arrival of a new world Satan made. Perhaps it's demonstrating a distancing from living harmoniously with nature. It's kind of really up to your own interpretation, honestly. What seems to be Satan's bride enters the stage with a pregnant belly and another young goat-headed man, and this kind of becomes a mess of chaotic representation of a modern world. They even put political heads in suits and walk them down the aisle that Satan was on. And at the end, we have a happy little melody. People are singing and rejoicing over the new tunnel. One thing that caught my eye was time spinning out of control. This whole ceremony reminds me of what I read from Roman celebrations or depictions of ancient civilizations that predicted the future to be an evil, materialistically driven, chaotic one, where people will lose touch with themselves so much that they can no longer think for themselves and are led by evil without even realizing it had taken them.
I think this is an outrageous display of satanic worship going on, which is propagated not only among but by the leaders of the world. Yes, Angela Merkel was present for this opening ceremony, took part in it, representing her country. Hollande was there with Merkel. Other heads of state were present there, including the head of state of Switzerland.
Every time you go to the airport, you can't miss this guy, the blue horse with the beet red eyes staring at you as you drive up to the main terminal. Well, now he's getting a friend. Check this out. It's Anubis, also known in Egypt as the god of death. And now it's hanging out at the airport. Fox 31's Kim Posey joins us live tonight from DIA. Kim, we'll start with the obvious. What were they thinking putting the god of death at the airport?
I think this is an outrageous display of satanic worship going on, which is propagated not only among but by the leaders of the world.
The statue that you can see behind me is of Anubis, who was the Egyptian god associated with death. He looked after mummification process and embalming process. He was also the protector of the dead, and that's really his role here today.
It is with great, great pleasure, therefore, that I hereby unveil the oldest new structure in the history of this city. Ladies and gentlemen, the Triumphal Arch of Palmyra. 3, 2, 1.
We want also to show defiance of the know-nothing nihilist maniacs who tore it down. This thing stood for 2,000 years. Everybody came and invaded or conquered that part of the world. The Greeks, Alexander the Great, the Romans, you name it, the Christians, the Muslims. No one until Daesh, a so-called Islamic State, thought it was worth demolishing. And how pitiful, how pathetic, how inadequate they must be.
It's nothing like the real thing. It's nice that it's here and people thinking about Palmyra. I was there before all the destruction occurred, and it really is heartrending to see what's happening. It's sheer ignorance, basically.
Happening in America. So the question is, could it appear? And it'd be crazy because nobody really even brings up Baal, but it happened. The sign of Baal has appeared on American soil. And it just happened within this last month. In September, it appeared in New York City. I went down there to witness it myself. Here's the arch that led the worshipers of Baal to worship Baal in the temple of Baal from Syria. And so,
no, but it wasn't introduced in New York as this is Baal here. It was introduced under other names, right?
Well, there's actually, and you may have a spot. There was actually a plaque right by the arch. It's the Temple of Bel. Well, Bel is Baal.
Okay.
Same God. Okay. Same God. So they're not saying we're worshiping this, but that's what they did. So here you've got an arch devoted to Baal. I mean, the god, the anti-god of the Bible. And happening in America. The deputy mayor of New York was speaking, and she says. In front of her, she says, we're doing this as an act of defiance. Now, this is in the Harbinger completely. And in the Harbinger, talks about the people saying we're going to rebuild Israel when they were attacked. Said, and this is the warning sign, said, we're going to rebuild what was broken, and it was broken by the Assyrians. Well, this arch was destroyed last year by ISIS, who are the Assyrians in the land of Assyria. So we're literally fulfilling the harbingers and putting up the sign of a nation, that America is the nation that has known God, has been falling away from God and turning to other things. It's calling evil good and good evil, persecuting the righteous. This is a danger sign.
But New York City is saying they're putting up this arch to defy ISIS, right?
That's right. Oh, that's right.
So on the surface, most people would say that's fantastic.
Of course, but so did ancient Israel. Ancient Israel was attacked by Assyria and said, we're going to do this, we're defying Assyria, but they were defying God too, because they were saying is we're going to come back stronger, greater without God. And that's what happened. And now, and of all things to put up, I mean, think about Baal. I mean, America.
I think this is an outrageous display of satanic worship going on, which is propagated not only among but by the leaders of the world.
It is with great, great pleasure, therefore, that I hereby unveil the oldest new structure in the history of this city. Ladies and gentlemen, the Triumphal Arch of Palmyra. 3, 2, 1.
We want also to show defiance of the know-nothing nihilist maniacs who tore it down. This thing stood for 2,000 years. Everybody came and invaded or conquered that part of the world. The Greeks, Alexander the Great, the Romans, you name it, the Christians, the Muslims. No one until Daesh, a so-called Islamic State, thought it was worth demolishing. And how pitiful, how pathetic, how inadequate they must be.
It's nothing like the real thing. It's nice that it's here and people thinking about Palmyra. I was there before all the destruction occurred, and it really is heartrending to see what's happening. It's sheer ignorance, basically.
We want also to show defiance.
So here you've got an arch devoted to Baal, I mean the god, the anti-god of the Bible, and happening in America. The deputy mayor of New York was speaking, and she says, we're doing this as an act of defiance.
We want also to show defiance.
I think this is an outrageous display of satanic worship going on, which is propagated not only among but by the leaders of the world.
Best chance to knock them out, then they will open the gates of hell to spill out on the world.
We will follow them to the gates of hell until they are brought to justice. Because hell is where they will reside. Hell is where they will reside.
We learned something very interesting about the Siri voice app. Comes with every iPhone. I'm going to give it a date and check out what happens. What is July 27th, 2014?
It's Sunday, July 27th, 2014, opening gates of Hades.
Opening gates of Hades. Very interesting. So, I mean, is the iPhone trying to do some kind of biblical prediction here? Let's try another date. Let's try the next day. What is July 28th, 2014?
It's Monday, July 28th, 2014.
That's it.
Tomorrow, Sotheby's is auctioning off this. What is that? Well, it's an Apple I computer. This is the motherboard. They didn't actually have a keyboard or a monitor when this was built. I'll tell you when in a moment. But it does come with the original instruction manuals. I mean, this is pretty amazing. It looks like it's in the 1800s. Anyway, there were only 200 of these computers made, and this is one of the 6 left that actually still work. Now, keep in mind that for the eventual buyer, you're not really going to obviously use this computer. The iPhone is 1,000 times faster. But power isn't what drives price in this case. This is a piece of history. Expected to sell for as much as $180,000, which is a far cry from the $666.66 it sold for back in 1976. Now, Apple's co-founder Steve Wozniak has said this price has nothing to do with the devil. It's just repeating digits are easier to type. You know, I call B baloney on that. Sorry.
I think this is an outrageous display of satanic worship going on, which is propagated not only among but by the leaders of the world.
So we're here in Brooklyn, where a group of pagan witches have gathered to place a hex on the newly confirmed Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Now, in the statement for the event, essentially they said that black magic is a mechanism for exacting justice by women who have been wronged by men just like him. Now, the ceremony is taking place at this occult bookstore behind me. Now, here in liberal Brooklyn, witchcraft, Wicca might just be considered to be another hobby or fascination. But in some parts of the country, it's no laughing matter. There are schools around the country where the Harry Potter books are forbidden from the school library because Christian parents are offended by the witchcraft content. And there have been cases where Satanists and Wiccan practitioners have gone to court demanding their religious freedom. Needless to say, tonight's ceremony did not sit well with a number of Trump supporters.
It is a scary time right now. I mean, there's a list of things going on. Now you've got witches that are placing a hex on Brett Kavanaugh.
Now, a Catholic priest who's been trained in Rome as a bona fide exorcist says he will be conducting a mass to protect Brett Kavanaugh from the witches. He says that witchcraft is not a matter of free speech.
Conjuring up personified evil does not fall under free speech. Satanic cults often commit crimes. They murder and sexually abuse everyone in their cult.
Does this look wholesome to you? This video alone could freak out parents, but the Satanic Temple is trying to reach students by getting into elementary schools nationwide. The group says it's an alternative to a Christian-based after-school program. Denver 7's Mark Boyle's been looking into this, and Mark, they say it's a kid-friendly club.
That's right. Hard to believe, but that's exactly what they preach here. And this is the parental permission slip that they're handing out so your kid can participate. Here's the After School Satan website. They even have a children's book dedicated to this. Now, they say there are some wholesome activities and lessons to be learned, but others believe it has no place around children. But there is obviously a lot of concern here. Some, like Liberty Counsel founder Matt Staver, say the club is nothing more than a bunch of atheists trying to fight back against Christian-based after-school programs.
This particular so-called Satanist club is not wanting to be there to express a viewpoint. They're wanting to disrupt the process.
I want to say that everybody's entitled to their beliefs. However, I feel like that's just a little odd.
Staver says he's seen pushes like this before, which have failed. The future of after-school Satan is still unclear, but the thought of it is certainly freaking a lot of people out. Now, we just received this email from Tucson schools just within the last half hour. They say they have declined the club's application. Right now, they don't have a faculty sponsor for that operation, but again, it's not slowing down the Satanic Temple from trying to get into the schools. Reporting in the newsroom, Mark Boyle. Back to you guys.
Yeah, got to have a sponsor. That can be a tough one. Despite the name, the Satanic Temple says it does not worship the devil and is an atheist group. The group uses satanic images to push their agenda for social justice and separation of church and state, they say.
Welcome back to News 5 at 10 o'clock. Chaos and controversy caused a slight delay at tonight's Pensacola City Council meeting. A leader from a satanic temple gave the invocation. Catrice Nolan was there for the meeting that quickly got out of hand.
The invocation started by David Soar, a representative of the Satanic Temple, and the crowd recited the Lord's Prayer.
Please maintain order. I appreciate that.
Lane interviewed many members across the country who say they found a place in the Satanic Temple after feeling out of place in other religions.
Satanism is looking out for the other, because we are the other.
I am following a code of ethics, having fellowship with brethren. Why can't that be a religion?
Despite spending years following the temple and its members, as well as becoming close to some of them, Penny Lane says she isn't a convert.
It made me respect religion in a whole new way. It made me think about the possibilities for what religion could be in the future. I always thought religion was essentially an anti-modern phenomenon that would be better off in the trash can. I don't feel that way anymore. I think religion's great.
Hail Satan is playing in theaters across the country. For InsideEdition.com, I'm Mara Montalbano.
But hey, you're not being indoctrinated.
I think this is an outrageous display of satanic worship going on, which is propagated not only among but by the leaders of the world.
In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
You take a look here, of course, Rome we know had different gods and goddesses they worshiped before Christ. On the left-hand side, here's a picture of Zeus. We can tell it's Zeus because he has the lightning bolt in his hand. Notice that the symbol that Zeus is holding in his left hand is the exact same symbol that the Pope holds. The symbol is called the Pope's monstrance. There is no monstrance in the Bible. This symbol is not described anywhere by the high priest Aaron. If you read the book of Leviticus, you would know that this does not exist anywhere with the priest. The Romans made Baal, Jupiter, into their chief god. Everyone knows that the chief god of the Roman Empire was Jupiter. The Flamen Dialis, which later be called the Pontifex Maximus, or the Pope, that was a priest of Jupiter. And so is it concerning, or is it even surprising to see that the symbols of Jupiter still show up in the church? But of course, if we go back and we take a look at Rome just about 100 years after Christ, we can see the Janus coin. The Janus coin also had a Janus temple on the other side. And you'll see Janus is this two-headed god. In one hand he held a key, in the other hand he held a scepter. It's actually referring to the sun and the moon. So when you see the yin and yang, you're actually looking at Janus. Janus, interestingly enough, showed up in Canadian politics in an unreleased document, which was actually released through a leak. The leak itself had to do with, in the United States, I believe it was the CIA, they had to declassify old documents. When those old documents were declassified, there was a Kickstarter. And the Kickstarter had an individual go down, I think it was Maryland is where the office was. But since everything was on paper, his Kickstarter was basically to scan all the documents and then release them on the internet, because it was public info, but you basically have to come down to that state to view the documents. So obviously not everyone could see it. My friend spent some money actually, and he bought those documents and he sent me a copy. And I was looking through the documents. Harry is actually on the phone right now, so Harry's listening in. But Harry sent these over to me, and when I looked through them, I found out that Canada's government had discussed all the religions in Canada and promoted a religion that was supposed to be more peaceful. And the religion that Canada promoted, you probably wouldn't even have heard of it if you didn't study with us. The religion was called Jainism, and Jainism is what you're looking at right now. Canada's leaders think that it's a good idea to promote the religion that you're looking at right now, and I have the document, and so does Harry. You'll see here there's a head going forwards and a head going backwards, sometimes depicted as a male and a female, sometimes depicted as an old man and a younger male, sometimes depicted as a female and a horned god. Here you can see the female and the horned god, and then you can see on the left, there's Athena. Why is that important? Because in Washington, D.C., on top of the Capitol building, you will find Athena's statue, which means Athena is standing with the god Janus, the horned god. Interesting symbol to have it on Capitol building. You'll notice here that Janus is also depicted like the alchemical marriage. So you'll see the sun in one hand, the moon in the other, kind of looks like a Siamese twin. This is what was being studied in the East. The chakra system goes back to this system. And you'll notice here that the alchemy that was practiced during the Middle Ages, if you compare that to the worship of Janus, you can tell it was the exact same idea. Over time, the symbol started to evolve. And so you can see here, Janus has the male and female face and now a pair of wings, like an angel. A sword in one hand, crown in the other. And if you look at the feet of Janus, you'll notice that Janus is stepping on top of a dragon, or in some cases, stepping on top of a serpent. If you look at the Renaissance period, again, you can see Janus, again, the sun and the moon, and then the serpent or the dragon beneath the feet. And then over time, it started to evolve, and Janus became this double-headed bird instead of a double-headed man. First, we had the Holy Roman Empire, first we had the Byzantine Empire, then came the Holy Roman Empire, And then Janus went through a bit of an evolution. People who are practicing black magic, they only look at the left head. People who are practicing white magic, they look at the head when it points towards the right. In Germany, Hitler was practicing black magic. The eagle's head is oriented towards the left. If you look at the United States of America, the founding fathers, the eagle, again, the head is oriented towards the left. Now, what's interesting is if you count the leaves, there's 13 leaves, 13 stripes, and there's 13 arrows. Why 13? You'll notice the Goddard Tunnel was 13 kilometers. Lucky 13, Friday the 13th, goes back to the goddess. One half of Janus is the Queen of Heaven. So when you see the female side, you're seeing the Virgin Mary of the church, except this isn't the Virgin Mary of the Bible. This is Aphrodite. This is Venus. This is Lucifer of the Bible. What they've done is they've taken Lucifer and combined her into this male-female kind of a Christ character. So when you see the woman holding the child, you're just looking at Janus. And you can tell because all you have to do is look at her feet. Under her feet, you'll see the crescent moon and the serpent. And that is exactly what you saw with the worship of Janus. This is a solar goddess. This is the worship of Cybele. Again, when we see the Baphomet of the Knights Templar, on one half we have the horned god, on the other half we have the goddess. Or we have Beauty and the Beast. Again, they're indoctrinating you. They're teaching you their ideology. Remember, we said that Aphrodite, who is Venus, who is Lucifer, Aphrodite was represented by a rose. Look under Belle on Beauty and the Beast. She has a rose directly beneath her. The colors of Freemasonry are blue and gold. The colors of these two are also blue and gold. Blue for the sky, yellow for the sun. The character, the main character, this is Belle, which means that Lucifer is played by Belle. And of course, Belle is the feminine name of Baal, and Baal was a sun god in the Bible. In Freemasonry, which are the colors that match the front of this movie, and Walt Disney was a Mason, we see that the name given in the 18th degree of the Royal Arch degree of Masonry is Jabulon. Jabulon. And if we read the fine print, Jabulon is the ineffable name used in India was Aum. Okay, well, Aum is a triliteral name. It's triliteral form. Was significant of the creative, preservative, and destroying power. That is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Jehovah, of the varieties of the sacred name used among the different nations of the earth. Three particularly merit the attention of Royal Arch Masons. Look at point number 2. Baal or Bel. This word signifies a lord, master, or possessor, and hence it was applied by many of the nations of the East. I'll repeat that. Many of the nations of the East to denote the Lord of all things, the master of the world. So in other words, Bel or Baal, the deity, was used throughout the East to denote the word Lord. And you see in the Bible that the people have a problem where they're saying the word Lord, but they actually start worshiping other deities. Are you understanding how this is happening now? So Bel in Beauty and the Beast is Baal of Freemasonry, the Baal of Babylon. It's a sun goddess. Here's Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. If Baal or Bel is a sun goddess, then that means that Lucifer is a female. Well, that makes sense because people say things like the devil wears Prada, insinuating the idea that the devil was a female. The reason why is because if God is supposed to be symbolized as a male energy, then the devil, who is an angel, chooses to symbolize themselves as a female, just to be contrary. So here's Morals and Dogma. And if you take a look, it says, the true name of Satan, the Kabbalists say, is that of Yahweh reversed. But I'm going to go down a bit. For the initiates, this is not a person, but a force. So what is Satan? Satan is not a person. Satan is a force created for good, but which may serve for evil. So when you look at their logo is a yin and yang, right? I've explained to people in the New Age movement before. I said, look, you might be doing works of good, but you're still joined to the God of evil. And so if you look at the sentence, it says created for good, but which may serve for evil. In other words, you can use Satan, you can use the Force, right? The Force be with you, Star Wars. You can use the Force for good, or you can become like the dark forces, right? The Empire. It's just a force. It's like having a knife. If Satan was a knife, the knife can be used for good, or the knife can be used for evil. That's what the black and white colors of the yin yang. It is the instrument of liberty or free will. They represent this force, which presides over the physical generation under the mythologic and horned form of the god Pan. So when you see the symbol of the goat, what are you actually seeing? It's a symbol of a force. It's representing a force that is being depicted as the scary looking goat. So while you think that there's some crazy goat demon running around that they're worshiping, they don't worship some crazy looking goat demon. They look at this goat picture as a description of the force that they use to either do good or bad in the world. Thence the name he-goat of the Sabbath, brother of the ancient serpent, and the light bearer or phosphor, of which the poets have made the false Lucifer of legend. And so here what we're seeing is, we're seeing that the goat is the brother of the serpent, and the serpent is Lucifer. In the book farther on page 321, 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6. It says the apocalypse, which is the Greek word for revelation. So the revelation is, to those who receive the 19th degree, the apotheosis of the sublime faith which aspires to God alone and despises all the pomps and works of Lucifer. Lucifer, the light bearer, strange and mysterious name given to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning, just like the book of Isaiah, is it he who bears the light, and with it splendors, intolerable, blinds, feeble, and selfish, sensual or selfish souls. Doubt it not, for traditions are full of divine revelations. If we take a look here, this is from Magic and Theory. We just looked at this last week. If you remember, we were looking at Sabrina. And if you remember in Sabrina, I showed you there was a symbol of a downward triangle, and I connected it to the earth symbol. Well, here we're looking at Magic by Aleister Crowley, and again, you've got the downward triangle. If it has the horizontal line, it represents earth. Without the horizontal line, it represents water. Water and earth go together, and air and fire go together. Air and fire is easy to see because you need oxygen to feed a fire. So here we see the downward triangle, the same downward triangle that we saw with Sabrina. And if you notice here, it says, hymn to Pan. Thrill with lithesome lust of light, O man, come careering out of the night, O Pan, O Pan. So Aleister Crowley's making a hymn to Pan. Sabrina has Pan, or the Baphomet, within the show. The Satanic Church has the symbol of the Baphomet. Europe at the Goddard Tunnel, where all the European leaders were, they had the Baphomet there, they had Pan there. What is everyone's obsession with the goat god? And how can you pretend that you don't see it after seeing this many examples? If we go back to Albert Pike says this on page 588 of La Femme et l'Enfant. And now the book's called The Woman and the Child. Now, who's the woman and the child? That would be the god in the east and the goddess, which we've been looking at pictures of. It says, yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately, Adonai is too. So in other words, what's the theory of Masonry? Well, God is the devil. Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately, Adonai is too. Caria, eternal law, is that there is no splendor without shadow, no beauty without ugliness, no white without black. For the absolute can only exist as two. For darkness is necessary to the light to serve as a repellent. Like the pedestal is necessary to the statue, like the brake to the locomotive. Let me tell you why this is wrong. If we look in the Bible will disprove these statements. And the reason why is because in the book of John, it says, God is light. In him there is no darkness. So now we can tell there is only one legitimate God and then a false God who is a mixture of both black and white, darkness and light. That's Lucifer, the male, female, the androgynous God, the goat and the woman that you just keep seeing over and over again. We can see that Crowley, Sabrina, the Beatles, and the list goes on. Valentine's Day, like this goat is integrated with almost everything that we do. And still, people look at when people stick up the devil horns and they're like, oh, he's just rocking it out. I'm like, maybe if it's your friends and family, but if this person's getting paid $24 million to make a song, they're probably doing so under the guidance of something that's a little bit bigger than you and I. It says, I am thy mate, I am thy man, goat of thy flock, I am gold, I am God, flesh to thy bone, flour to thy rod. Again, where did we see Lupercalia and the goat being practiced? In Rome. Did the Romans deify themselves? Did the Caesars think that they were God? Yeah, they did. And so here we see, goat of thy flock, I am gold, I am God. Why would they say, goat of thy flock, I am gold, I am God? What was Crowley saying? What color is the sun? It's gold. When you study Lupercalia, you'll find that the goat was associated to the sun. He's a nature god. But this shouldn't be surprising because Crowley always signed his name as the Baphomet. And isn't it interesting that during Lupercalia, the priests would think that they were Lupercus? In other words, they thought that they were the Baphomet. They were doing a ritual to the Baphomet by being the Baphomet. I mean, they were wearing goat skin. And that's the same thing we see in the images of the Baphomet with Crowley. What also is interesting is the fact that we saw in the alchemical pictures, there was a sword and there was a crown. Well, take a look at this. That was way before Crowley's time. Here's the swords, they're crossed, and above it, there's the crown. And there, that's the all-seeing eye of Egypt. So again, the Masons and Crowley, they seem to have an overlap in regards to the Egyptian gods. I've never said that the Masons were bad people. I just said that they have a different God than the God of the Bible. They look at the goat as being a good thing, and it's associated to life, it's associated to love. But of course, the way that we look at this image, the way that we look at this force to us is the devil. It says, every wise magician will have constructed according to the principles of the Holy Kabbalah. We looked at that last week. The Holy Kabbalah, that was in Egypt. The Holy Kabbalah, I mean, it wasn't called the Kabbalah in Egypt, but it was in Egypt. It was also in Hinduism. It was everywhere that people worship the sun, the moon, and the stars. In the book of Deuteronomy, where it says, don't worship the sun, the moon, the stars, or any of the host of heaven, everyone in the East were doing that. Horoscopes, for example, the zodiac, for example, all the stuff that's associated to the worship of the stars, that came from the East. Now, it didn't necessarily come from Asia originating, but it made its way into Asia from Babylon. So it came from Mesopotamia, went into Asia, then came back into places like Europe. So nothing is hidden. When you take a look at everything that's going on in front of you, remember, when this all ends, you won't be able to say, I had no idea.
What I do, I will continue to do, in order to undermine the claim of those who would like to claim that in their boasted mission they work on the same terms as we do. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds. I repeat, let no one think me foolish.
For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of the dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Brothers and sisters, the sword is coming. If you hear the watchman's call, please repent and seek out Jesus Christ. There is still time. That at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow.